Are you part of the great resignation, that mass exodus of people who are leaving their jobs to start something new? Then something you need to consider is what to do with your company 401k. Rather than just rolling it over, consider opening a truly self-directed IRA. With a self-directed IRA, a truly self-directed IRA, your retirement portfolio can include real estate, precious metals, cryptocurrency, notes, loans, a new business, and traditional equities like stocks and bonds. You can make any investment the law allows with a truly self-directed retirement account. Listen, you probably have questions, so why not take the time to get the answers? Start with going to IRAadvantage.com. Then talk to the truly self-directed IRA professionals at IRA Advantage.
Would you like to learn more about truly self-directed IRAs? Then visit IRAadvantage.com, view our videos, and call IRA Advantage. Let us set up a truly self-directed IRA for you. That's IRAadvantage.com.
Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. We call this Conspiracy Theory Thursday, so consider this. They've actually voted on impeaching Joe Biden, but I'll get into the details of it in just a moment. If you'd like to join what we call, and I think we live up to this, the best conversation in talk journalism, it's right here every weekday at 866-HEY-LARS. And if you're a naysayer, that is, you disagree with my point of view on something, you're not only welcome, you're going to go right to the head of the line at 866-439-5277. Send your emails to talk@larslarson.com and cast a vote in our Twitter poll. I got to bring this up. Did Hunter Biden get a sweetheart deal on gun and tax crimes because of his anti-gun and pro-tax daddy, the president of the United States? I would have to answer that one yes. I know it might seem kind of obvious to some of you, but I have a feeling there are people who say, oh, no, Hunter Biden was treated just like every other criminal gets justice in the United States. In any case, consider the question, did Hunter Biden get a sweetheart deal on his gun and tax crimes because of his anti-gun and pro-tax daddy in the White House? I'd say yes. That's my answer. Answer any way you like at Lars Larson Show, and brought to you by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. AMAC has the conservative values I believe in. I joined the group a long time ago. You should too. Just go to amac.us or call 888-262-2006. AMAC is better. Better for you and better for America. Now, what about that impeachment vote? Yep. House Republicans forced a vote today. It sent the matter to congressional committees in a demonstration of the kind of challenge that Speaker Kevin McCarthy faces in controlling the majority party. That is the way the Associated Press puts it. Representative Lauren Boebert from Colorado, backed up by allies, was able to use House rules to force a snap vote on such a grave constitutional matter. 219 to 208, a party line vote that sent her resolution to committees for possible consideration. Like any other bill, they are under no obligation to do any such thing. It sounds like they want to table the matter altogether. And yet, I made the case to you. Do you think that Joe Biden is guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors the way the founders of our country believed when they wrote impeachment into the Constitution? I believe that he is. And I believe you could start almost anywhere in Joe Biden's time in office. The lies that were told about the pandemic and about the so-called vaccine that was developed. The lies that were told about how well the Afghanistan government would stand up when Americans decided to leave. The lie that Joe Biden told in August, almost exactly 3 years ago, just short of 3 years ago, when he said, we won't leave Afghanistan until every single American is out. The fact that Joe Biden decided to take America from energy independence and a greater than its needs producer of oil and natural gas, all of that is well worth holding Joe responsible. The fact that he told Americans, this inflation thing, it's just temporary. How many years are we into it now? And there's no sign of us coming out the other side of that tunnel. So consider all the reasons that Joe Biden might be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. The fact that after 13 service members died because of a botched withdrawal from Afghanistan that wasn't even necessary, we could have kept the situation static there by leaving 2,500 service members there. They had not had a single casualty in 18 months in Afghanistan. And I know that these days, from a lot of you, I get emails saying, oh, Lars, why are you going over old stuff from 2021? Are we really moving along that quickly that you can say 13 service members died because of a botched withdrawal from that country? The fact that Joe Biden and his military leaders said, don't worry about Kabul. The local government will stay together for quite some time. It lasted for what, a month or maybe 6 weeks, and then it fell apart. It literally left thousands of Americans and both green card holders and citizens who are trapped in Afghanistan. Wouldn't that be enough all by itself? But no, the Republicans who will promise you anything to get reelected, and they said, we'll go after Joe Biden. We'll go after his Homeland Security Secretary. We'll go after the border. None of that has actually happened. And I know they say, but when we get a majority, I'll remind you, Republicans had a majority in the House and the Senate under Donald Trump. They could have moved forward with legislation to pass funding for a wall. That wall would have been a game changer when it comes to the current border problems we have. Instead, we now have literally millions of people who are crossing into America illegally, and it's creating a problem that's going to last for decades in this country. The cost is one we'll be paying for a long time. Second thing I want you to consider, and that's this. Did the DOJ interfere with the tax crime investigation into Hunter Biden? A Ways and Means Committee executive meeting resulted in a vote to release to the public whistleblower testimony of two different IRS employees who worked directly on the tax evasion case of Hunter Biden. These are crimes, remember. These are crimes for which American citizens sometimes go to prison because they commit tax crimes. Hunter Biden will not be going to prison. Example number one, the federal government treats different taxpayers differently. They provide preferential treatment to the wealthy and the well-connected, including the son of the President of the United States. Biden got preferential treatment in the course of the investigation, according to whistleblowers, struck the plea deal that we talked about earlier this week. Meanwhile, in 2014, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida announced that a man was sentenced to 13 months in prison to be followed by supervised release, meaning probation or parole, for failing to file an income tax return, the same misdemeanor tax offense that Hunter Biden was charged with. So the guy in Florida gets 13 months in prison. Hunter Biden gets a slap on the wrist. Example number two. The Department of Justice interfered in the investigation into Hunter Biden's tax issues with a delay, divulge, and deny campaign. Delay. Recurring unjustified delays pervaded the investigation, including an authenticating of the message between Hunter Biden and Chinese officials. They said, well, we got to take some time with this one. They dragged their feet as much as they possibly could. They failed to divulge information, and then they denied charges that were about to be brought in March of last year. And tell me why? Because Hunter Biden is Hunter Biden. By the way, are you a small business owner who could use a few $100,000? Employee retention tax credits, they're an incredible opportunity. Call the experts at Get My Funds. They've been around since the beginning of the pandemic, and they've already helped out 1,500 small business owners. And what did they get? $300 million in funding. And they know what they're doing at Get My Funds. They have a team of CPAs who specialize in filing for these tax credits. And they're with you every step of the way, even if there's an audit. They stand behind their work with an audit safeguard. If you retain 5 or more W-2 employees during COVID, and even if you already got the PPP money, you need to call Get My Funds now at 800-535-2950. It's not a grant. It's not a loan. It's a tax refund. No upfront fees to find out if you qualify. Go with a team you can trust at Get My Funds at 800-535-2950 or getmyfunds.com. That's getmyfunds.com. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you on what we call Conspiracy Theory Thursday. Usually we visit with our friend Christian Toto, the host of Hollywood in Toto, the podcast. I want to talk about some of the new, the old school comedies out there. There's a brand new one called No Hard Feelings. But before we get to that, Kristen, welcome to the program. And tell me, how long do you suppose it's going to be before somebody pitches a script of the story of the submarine that we now know, unfortunately, catastrophically failed, killing all 5 people on board?
I hope it takes a while. It's certainly a story, and it's worth telling, and it's dramatic, and obviously the ending is not what we'd hoped for. But I feel like for the people involved, they don't need to see this movie right away, honestly. So I don't know, maybe, there was a recent movie by Ron Howard about children trapped in a Thai cave, and I think that one took a while before we saw it, in theaters. So I just think that maybe you need to kind of take a knee and take some time and let the process go through, and then maybe in a few years we can investigate what happened and hopefully learn some things.
I would hope so, too, because I also saw, and I think I sent it to you, some comments from James Cameron, who made the Titanic movie, and he was talking about how this failed, as they were going down to see the wreck of the Titanic, and then this thing failed, and it was also a vessel whose owner, whose CEO, who was on board and died in the implosion that apparently happened a couple of days ago, and they just located enough to tell how the end came, and they're saying that mercifully, at least, it was instantaneous. But he said he found it kind of haunting, the comparisons between the invulnerable Titan submarine, as it was described by the CEO of the company, and they also thought the Titanic was invulnerable and literally unsinkable, and it wasn't.
Yeah, history repeats itself. It's scary but true and inevitable. So, and Cameron isn't just a filmmaker. I mean, he's done a lot of deep sea expeditions. A lot of his documentary work has involved that. So he knows what he's talking about of these things, and he's not just an artist giving a hot take. He gets it.
I think you're right. Hey, let's talk about let's go from that to comedies. I know that's a tough transition, but old school comedies are kind of an endangered species these days because of the woke era. You got to be politically correct, you got to have diversity, and now diversity is going to be forced on Hollywood. Tell me about this new movie, No Hard Feelings, and whether or not it's a winner or not.
It sounded like a return to form. It sounded old school, and you could even say it sounds tacky. It's about a woman who is hired by parents to date their son. The son is 19, so he's of age, but he's very shy with girls. He's introverted. He stays home and plays video games. He's going off to college, and the parents say, wouldn't it be nice if he met a girl and maybe even dated her? And you can insinuate what you want, because that is part of the story here. So Jennifer Lawrence plays the woman, and she is trying to seduce this younger gentleman and teach him the ways of the world. And again, you could say that's outrageous and bawdy, but that's the kind of stuff they used to do. And often it can be very funny. And Jennifer Lawrence is a wonderful actress, and I think she's very game here. But it's not that funny, and it's not that outrageous either. I think they took this concept that could have been crazy and off the wall, and they backed away a little bit. It's sort of sentimental at times. The story moves in different directions where it's kind of pulling its punches, I would say. So it's okay. I got a couple chuckles out of it. Again, she's very good in it. She's always a talented performer. But I was hoping for something old school. I was hoping for oh gosh, they don't make them like this anymore. Maybe they're coming back. But it didn't quite get there with No Hard Feelings.
Did you get a sense of why they pulled their punches? What did it have to do with trying to be politically correct and not make anybody angry? Or was it just they didn't write it very well?
I suspect it's both. It actually, in the beginning of the film, there's a lot of woke asides. I thought, oh my gosh, not only is this not what I thought it could be, it's going in a different direction. But then it settles in. But it's really about two people going in different directions with their lives and how they are able to help each other. And there's nothing wrong with that. That could be a wonderful story. But I just think you've got to commit. You've got to go with the flow. You've got to say, hey, this is a raucous R-rated romp like they used to make, or this is a comedy that looks into the psyches of two different people and sees how they're unlikely to bond, but they do, that kind of thing. So I just think it's a lot of half measures. And again, the script isn't as good as it should be, and a lot of head scratching plot moves and character decisions that don't help at all.
I'm talking to Christian Toto. He's the host, of course, of the Hollywood and Toto podcast. Let me ask you this. The last couple of years I've been asking you, is Hollywood finally going to realize that being shoved into the woke box or the PC box or the diversity box is not going to end well? Like watching in a movie where you can say, don't walk into that house, the one with the, the scary stuff. And yet Hollywood never seems to wake up. Are there signs it's starting to wake up to what they've signed off on?
I think piece by piece in recent weeks, we've seen Tom Hanks and also Steven Spielberg speak out against censorship in books And also, more recently, Jennifer Lawrence, who we just talked about a second ago, she said it's getting harder and harder to make movies where someone isn't offended. So I think even she's acknowledging, hey, it's tricky to do those old school comedies because what if you say this joke, or what if you, demonize this organization, or it's just there's so many little landmines you have to navigate. And also recently, Eva Longoria was talking about, hey, she was in Desperate Housewives. That movie made her a star. A TV show made her a star. And now she's saying, I don't even know if we could do that TV show today. It was so raucous. It was so rowdy. It was so unconventional. And I think that's her way of saying, I wouldn't even be here making movies anymore if the culture was the way it was, now as it was then. So I think some artists get it. I think most of them are still very afraid to speak out. And that's a shame because it is their livelihood. It is creativity. I think they could push the envelope in ways that would make better movies and better TV shows. But I don't think we're quite there yet.
I know, Christian, we've already talked about the movie Flaming Hot, and we've talked about the fact that, like a lot of movies, it maybe took too much literary license and told a story that wasn't true, but it was a cool story about this guy who comes up with Flaming Hot Cheetos and all that. She's the one behind that, and the film definitely leans conservative. It presents faith and family and hard work and all the rest of that. It's got a lot of victim stuff in it as well. But she was the one behind that movie, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. There's actually a slam against President Reagan mid-movie, which really comes out of nowhere and doesn't connect with the story that much at all. So, she is a progressive activist in Hollywood, and she's been at the DNC conventions. But if you're going to tell the story, it is about hard work. It is about faith. It is about, not giving up, not surrendering to the victim mentality. And I don't think you can tell the story without acknowledging all those things. So good for her. I think as a storyteller, she got that message, and it really does convey on the screen, even if, again, all the things didn't exactly happen the way they said.
Do you think then maybe we've seen the swing far left, far woke, far all that stuff, and then now we're starting to see the swing back, or is this just a head fake?
I think it's too soon to tell. Every time I get excited that there is a momentum shift in a different direction, I'm disappointed dramatically. So you take the good signs. You hope that the artists will finally speak up and use their voice in a way that would be powerful and commensurate with the work they do. They can talk about politics all they want, but they are artists. They are storytellers. They are comedians. They are creative folks. And if they don't want to defend their own craft, then that's a problem. So the more they do, the better it is. But we need many more people speaking out.
Absolutely. That's Christian Toto. He's the host of the Hollywood and Toto podcast, and he is a conservative. I think I'm safe in saying that without getting him in trouble. Christian, thanks very much. I appreciate it. If you're buying that name brand CBD right now, write down this website, genericcbd.com. That's genericcbd.com. And make the switch to generic and save today. You can save up to 75%. Their products are fantastic. On a side note, they sell a muscle and joint cream that's out of this world. It retails usually for $100, on sale right now for $39.95. You can try it for free if you want. Just pay $2.95 for shipping. This penetrating cream melts right into your muscles and your joints, including your knees, your elbows, and your lower back. You won't believe how fast it goes to work. Plus, it doubles as one of the best moisturizers you've ever tried. Try it for yourself. You'll love it. And don't worry, it's not a subscription. Get your free sample at genericcbd.com. Get that free sample headed your way right now. See what this amazing CBD cream can do for you. Get that sample at genericcbd.com. These products and statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or illness. Coming up, we got to talk about fires and crazy environmentalists. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you on a Conspiracy Theory Thursday. I think I have a good one for you. If you were suspecting that many times we see wildfires start in the summertime, and a great many of them are caused by human beings. Sometimes it's by accident, but in many cases, you're seeing fires that are set deliberately. Now, sometimes that is a firebug, somebody who is fascinated with committing arson. That's bad enough. But then consider there may be a good basis for believing that some of these fires are being set deliberately to make political points. As you saw a few weeks ago, the choking smoke that invaded places like Manhattan and the upper northeastern part of the United States. And we were told, oh, those fires, they're all happening because of climate change. Somebody was trying to make a point. Except that when people began to look at the evidence and they found that a great many of those fires were set, and they all seemed to start at about the same time. I saw some of the satellite evidence of that. When you have fires and there is no lightning at the time, and different fires in vastly different places across a big part of a country all seem to start at the same time, you say maybe somebody is setting them deliberately, and not just because they're fascinated with fire the way some of the firebugs are, the people who commit arson because of their mental problems. But what if they're being set to make a point? Let me point this out. They have now arrested a man who's a fairly major donor to the Democrat Party, and they've arrested him for setting fires. Several firefighters injured in a ginormous blaze donated to the Lincoln Project, which is a very left-wing kind of organization. And authorities busted a Democrat donor for starting one of those fires. His name, believe it or not, is Edward Frederick Wackerman. He is from Mariposa, California. He faces charges, including aggravated arson. He was arrested a week ago on Friday. Now, what happened? He had donated about $1,700 to Democrat candidates and committees in the last couple of years. He also gave a $1,000 donation to Tim Ryan's failed U.S. Senate campaign. That was last year. He gave $400 to the Lincoln Project, which is a now disgraced liberal super PAC. The fire, called the Oak Fire, destroyed 127 homes and 66 outbuildings, barns and sheds and that sort of thing. About 6,000 people were forced to evacuate. It touched off about 30 square miles of fire, and some of the smoke had drifted 200 miles into parts of Nevada and the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, what are the police saying? Ed Wackerman is facing felony charges, including aggravated arson. This is from Mariposa County District Attorney Walter Wall. The charges carry serious legal consequences, and the district attorney is committed to ensuring a fair trial and upholding justice. Authorities will not say how Wackerman is believed to have started the fire. What they will say is thank you to all the firefighters. But then they add on to it the thing that I've become so accustomed to seeing and hearing that I'm almost not surprised when they do it. Worsening drought and severe weather will only continue to put lives and property at risk from wildfire if we don't take climate action now. That was the comment of Senator Alex Padilla. He is a Democrat from California. Now, he actually put that on his Twitter account in July of last year, not quite a year ago. And Vice President Al Gore made a comment as well about the same time, about a year ago. More people will be killed and the survival of our civilization is at stake. He cited climate change as the reason that droughts and fires are hitting us so hard. Well, I'm going to call BS on this because, yes, we understand that wildfires have been happening for a long time. In fact, if anything, wildfires have happened for literally thousands of years in North America. Most of them were touched off by lightning. But when people began to move to this area, and not just Europeans, but Native Americans would sometimes set fires so that they could clear areas for wildlife and for other kinds of purposes. So why are the fires being set now? Because they want to make the case on climate. The case that is being made and is likely to cost all of us so very much because we've got federal and local and state governments that are pushing hard to say we've got to ban natural gas stoves. We've got to ban gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles. And they don't have a good alternative to that. And they're doing all this, especially when it happens in California, in an era where our power grid is becoming more and more strained by the load we're putting on it. We've got politicians like Joe Biden and governors like Gavin Newsom and others who are saying why you have to drive an electric car, why you have to remove your natural gas furnace and your natural gas stove, and you have to stop using all these fossil fuels and use electricity instead. And to push that agenda, it may just be that some of their whack job fellow travelers are out there setting fires on purpose. Second issue I want to put in front of you, this summer, there are a number of summer camps for children, but the ones I want to draw your attention to are what they call trans summer camps for children as young as 4 years of age, meaning they have parents who believe that a child at the age of 4 can decide that he was born as a male, but in fact, there's a female inside the brain of that person, or vice versa. Somebody who was born female who believes that they are male, and that they're making these decisions not at the age of 18, not even in their teens, but they're sometimes making those decisions as early as age 4. For example, Camp Lilac, an overnight camp in an undisclosed location in central Ohio, where more than 100 kids as young as age 12 are free to, according to the website for the camp, socialize, grow, and express themselves in an environment without caregiver supervision. By caregivers, the site is referring to parents who may volunteer at the camp. They cannot attend the sessions with their children. Now, I'd ask you, if you're a parent, would you turn your kids over to such a camp? Or Camp Mulberry, which is located in Southern California. It is a free of charge camp for transgender children as young as 6, according to its website. Camp Indigo, with locations in Oakland, California, and Boulder, Colorado, allows trans and what they call gender diverse kids who can't figure out if they're male or female, as young as 4 years of age, to enjoy a summer day camp experience. The co-founder of the group told the Daily Wire that about 150 kids per week attend the Oakland location, and more than 100 kids per week from 18 different states are attending the camp in Denver or in Boulder, Colorado. And then, of course, there's the Trans Youth Equity Foundation, which hosts a youth camp for transgender and non-binary children as young as 7 years of age. Would any sensible parent, turn their kids over to such a camp? I can't imagine it. Glad to have you with me. If you want to call in, it's 866-HEY-LARS. And what if you could help turn back the clock and help your dog play like a puppy again, no matter what their age? That's what Dr. Marty Pets did when they developed Nature's Blend, because your dog needs a diet full of real cuts of meat, similar to what they'd eat in the wild. Dogs go bonkers for Dr. Marty's Pets Nature's Blend. That's what I feed Sir Winston Churchill, my Bernese Mountain Dog, and he absolutely loves it. And when given the choice between Nature's Blend and the giant online retailer's #1 bestseller in dry dog food, a study shows 29 out of 30 dogs choose Nature's Blend. I'll tell you what, Winston Churchill absolutely loves Dr. Marty's and Nature's Blend. Other dog foods could give your dog problems. With Nature's Blend, they're getting the real stuff. For a limited time, claim 54% off Nature's Blend and get a free pack of premium dog treats from Dr. Marty Pets. Go to drmartypets.com/pets or text PETS to 511-511. That's PETS to 511-511. Study available upon request. Message and data rates do apply. Glad to have you with me on Conspiracy Theory Thursday. Coming up, does anybody remember Joe Biden's promise to cure cancer? We'll talk about that next. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's Conspiracy Theory Thursday, and who better to talk to about that than Seton Motley, the president of Less Government, great organization. And Seton, welcome back.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Not too bad, but I still remember when Barack Obama announced, I think about 9 or 10 months before the end of his second term as president, and we were glad to see him go, that Joe Biden would be assigned the task of curing cancer. And at the time, I remember asking myself, what? He's going to cure cancer in the next 9 months? How's that going to happen? Well, it shows now that Joe Biden is in charge of the executive branch, which means he runs the federal agencies. You've suggested that his own Federal Trade Commission is actually one of the biggest impediments to curing cancer right now. So he's gone from curing it to what? Making it worse?
Well, he during the campaign, before he was elected, he said, "We will cure cancer in my first term."
Right.
And of course, that's ludicrous. Any government that can't keep itself from being $32 trillion in debt is probably not going to cure cancer, is my guess. But so now we go forward and we say, okay, is he working on this? Well, the Federal Trade Commission, you and I have discussed this agency. It's run by a woman named Lena Khan. She's incredibly hyperactive. She's incredibly, from all her actions as chairman, it looks like she's against any private sector economic activity whatsoever. She hasn't seen a merger she likes. Now, I certainly want FTC action, but please use a rifle, not a shotgun. And one of the mergers she's opposing right now makes her look at once anti-merger and anti-patent. There's a company called Grail, who, from all appearances, has developed a way to preemptively blood test somebody and figure out whether or not they're going to get cancer.
Wow.
Well, that's a pretty impressive thing if it works, and it seems to work. So it's a very boutique thing now. Well, there's a company called Illumina that makes a machine that implements the test and therefore will make it much more widely available to humans.
Right.
Well, that's the kind of merger we want. That's the kind of economic activity we want. The mergers I oppose are the two companies that dominate X merging to monopolize X. Let's block that merger.
Sure.
This is a company that does X merging with another company that has nothing to do with the execution of X. It has to do with the implementation of X and making it much more widely available. The whole point of antitrust is, does the merger hurt consumers? I cannot see a way to argue that these two companies merging to make much more available this blood test hurts consumers. That's insane. She also said she opposes it because this company is the only one that does the test. Yes, Ms. Khan, that's called invention.
Yeah.
Somebody invents it, and they're the only ones doing it. Before there's 50 of something, there's only one of something. And we're at the one phase. Now, I tried to look it up. I didn't see any stories that said they've patented this invention. I'm sure they have, though. Let's be realistic.
Yeah, if Illumina makes the machines that Grail uses to look at the blood cancer. So Illumina, unless they're run by idiots, have taken whatever machine they've developed.
And Grail patented the test.
Right.
And Grail patented the test. And her opposition is Grail's the only company doing this test. Yes, because they invented it and they probably patented it. So for a finite period of time, by the Constitution and government law, they're the only ones that can do it. So her opposition seems to be anti-patent too, because quite obviously this is a patented technology that just got invented, and it's exactly why we have patent law. It's exactly why we want these mergers to go through, and she's opposed to the merger for it being antithetical to her worldview, which seems to be antithetical to everything we want to happen in the private sector.
Okay, so tell me this. If you think there's another agenda going on here, if she's not looking at it saying, boy, this is going to limit competition. No, this is going to make the test more available. What do you think her real agenda is there?
I don't, it's when people are this hardcore ideological, when you're a hammer, the world looks like it's full of nails.
Yep.
And she seems just to be anti-merger in any merger. She seems to be anti any merger, and it's almost like there's no actual analysis of this merger or that merger. For efficacy and good things for consumers and all that. It's a merger. It's bad.
And yet, I can imagine. I haven't had any companies that I've been involved in that are merged. I really don't do anything but radio or podcasting, that sort of thing. But
you merge in traffic.
Yeah, I merge in traffic. That's all I do. But I can imagine situations where you have a really good idea at a company that doesn't have any money or it doesn't have a plant to produce the thing, whatever the thing is. And there's this other company that doesn't have any really unique technology, but boy, it's got plant, it's got workers, it's got some capital.
Right.
You merge the two together, and all of a sudden the company that has this great new device or service or whatever now has the capability to produce a lot of it. That's a good merger, right?
That's exactly. You basically described what's going on between Grail and Illumina. They don't. I guess Grail could go on Shark Tank and ask for money to build these machines. But then again, like you said, Illumina's probably got a patented machine. So, yes, you want these companies getting together because instead of, thousands of people having access to this test, you're going to have millions or tens of millions with access to this test. I don't see the consumer harm in this merger taking place. I see the consumer harm in blocking the merger.
Right. And frankly, I can think of a number of times where people have called me or emailed and said, hey, I've got a friend. He's got a great idea. It's really innovative. And he couldn't get anybody, to put up the capital or to put up the manufacturing ability. And so as a result, it went by the wayside. And then somebody else came up with it 5 years later. And so his opportunity is gone. And that happens all the time.
All the time. Yes.
Except now the government is going to make sure it happens more of the time, which absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. Seaton, thanks very much. I appreciate your time. That is our friend Seaton Motley, who in that case just hung up. Glad to get your calls at 866-HEY-LARS. That's 866-439-5277. Send your emails to talk@LarsLarson.com. You can vote in our Twitter poll. You'll find the poll question every day at Lars Larson Show on Twitter and at LarsLarson.com on the web. And if you care to, tell Alexa to play the Lars Larson Show. Are you part of the great resignation, that mass exodus of people who are leaving their jobs to start something new? Then something you need to consider is what to do with your company 401k. Rather than just rolling it over, consider opening a truly self-directed IRA. With a self-directed IRA, a truly self-directed IRA, your retirement portfolio can include real estate, precious metals, cryptocurrency, notes, loans, a new business, and traditional equities like stocks and bonds. You can make any investment the law allows with a truly self-directed retirement account. Listen, you probably have questions, so why not take the time to get the answers? Start with going to IRAadvantage.com. Then talk to the truly self-directed IRA professionals at IRA Advantage.
Would you like to learn more about truly self-directed IRAs? Then visit IRAadvantage.com, view our videos, and call IRA Advantage. Let us set up a truly self-directed IRA for you. That's IRAadvantage.com.
Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's Conspiracy Theory Thursday, and I've got at least two of them for you. We heard the news just a few hours ago that the end of the implosion that took the lives of apparently all five on board the Titan submarine, the one that was going down to take a group, the pilot and four passengers, down to the wreck of the Titanic, that submarine apparently imploded, that the end came very, very quickly, and that the search for the last couple of days has been for people who already died on the first day when that submarine went missing, because apparently the pressure vessel just failed in some way. Maybe they will determine how that happened. Maybe they will not. So that's one. And then you consider the history we're hearing about the company involved. A company CEO who claimed that his submarine to take people to the wreck of the Titanic was invulnerable. The man who said, I won't hire those old white guys with gray hair. I'm not going to hire those people with experience. I want to hire young, impressive people who are going to inspire people to be involved. And some of the other shortcuts that were apparently taken by the company that ran that submarine. And then you've got the new IRS whistleblower who now says that Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden, was tipped off early by the DOJ. He knew what was coming at him. He knew what was going to be searched. And, of course, he got an incredible sweetheart deal, a slap on the wrist for tax crimes, a slap on the wrist for his gun crime. So my question in our Twitter poll today, did Hunter Biden get a sweetheart deal on his gun and tax crimes because of his anti-gun and pro-tax daddy? I would say yes. Today's Twitter poll can be found at Lars Larson Show and is brought to you by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. It has the conservative values I believe in. I joined a long time ago. You can too. Just go to amac.us or call 888-262-2006. AMAC's better for you and better for America. To your calls now. Let's start with Thomas in Alabama. Hey, Thomas, welcome to Conspiracy Theory Thursday. What's on your mind?
Hey, Lars, my brother. Godly welcome from the South. I appreciate your commentaries and your radio program. Hey, guess
Thank
what?
you.
We survived Greta Thunberg's prediction that we were going to die because of global warming here in the South.
Yeah, we sure did, didn't we? Well, I'm not in the
Sure
South,
did,
but thank God.
Yeah. So, and as far as like, the submarine, my heart goes out to those people, rich, poor, doesn't matter. I feel bad for them,
I feel badly for them too.
Feet depth, when you're at 14,000 feet, money can't buy you safety.
No.
Doesn't matter.
I also,
and what
Thomas,
I've learned today at work.
We may not have heard the whole story, though, because my understanding is that the Navy now says they heard some kind of sound at about the time that the communication with the sub was lost, and that may have been the sound of the implosion, and it might have happened a lot earlier than when they got down that deep.
Yeah, that could have been anything, but you know what? According to some recent videos that I saw at work today, that they had a game controller from a Nintendo operating the thing. They had parts and pieces from, a store. I mean, they put the thing together and they didn't test it according to some kind of regulation.
It had made some it had gone down to the wreck, I believe, 20 different times. So apparently it worked for a while, but it does begin to sound as though the thing was kind of put together on a budget. And I mentioned yesterday that the man who was the safety director for the company was let go because he insisted on more safety testing, and they let him go. I think there were a lot of reasons to question whether or not the company was operating that thing safely and whether or not they had it budgeted.
Life on that.
What's
There's
that?
been a shelf life on.
Yeah,
there's been a shelf life on. Maybe like 10 dives, and then hey, let's check for structural integrity and everything. I've been in the Army for 20 years. I worked on Chinooks, and I tell you what, eventually you get cracks, you get fatigue, you get stress on metal.
Yep.
Eventually, you're gonna have to. Hey, you know what? The good Lord's gonna take you one day or another.
They don't run those blades on those helicopters forever, do they? They'll say they got a service life. There's a service life on almost everything.
Not the blades. The blades have there's no service life on the blades because Boeing actually makes pretty good blades on those. But
they do.
The rotor heads, the bearings, everything else, just like your car, you got to take care of it. And as far as like paying $250,000 to go down into the depths to see something, I think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits and justified.
Well, there may be, except that, Thomas, thanks for the call. There may be, but as I understand it, they actually had in the first page of the agreement that the tourists on board that submarine were required to sign, it actually mentions the word death 3 different times on page number 1. So apparently they had plenty of advance warning. Now the question is, will the family sue in any case? Yeah, they probably will. But I kind of wonder if OceanGate is going to survive as a company anyway after a disaster like this. Let's go to Jack. Hey, Jack, welcome to the Lars Larson Show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Lars. First-time caller. Long time listener. Love your show.
Thank you.
On the forest fires, I got an opinion about that because I've heard this a while back. Other, say, firefighters do start these fires just to stay working. If you know what I mean. And I know it sounds kind of bad,
I've heard that as well, and I think there are a couple of documented cases. Even city firefighters have occasionally been caught setting fires because of jobs. But I think this guy may have done it because of his political ideology. The guy they arrested for the fire last year in California that destroyed a lot of homes, and he seemed to be a big deal Democrat donor. And that tells me he might have actually believed in this global warming nonsense and decided, I got to set some fires to prove my case.
Make a point. Yeah, Lars. Hey, I love your show, man. You're awesome. Thank you, and stay there.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to stay here with your support. By the way, are you a small business owner who could use a few $100,000 and who couldn't? Employee retention tax credits, they're an incredible opportunity. Call the experts at Get My Funds. They've been around since the beginning of the pandemic, and they've already helped out 1,500 small business owners get about $300 million in funding, and they know what they're doing. They have a team of CPAs who specialize in filing for those tax credits, and they're with you every step of the way, even if there's an audit. If you retained 5 or more W-2 employees during COVID, and even if you already got that PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan money, you need to call Get My Funds now at 800-535-2950. It's not a grant, it's not a loan, it's a tax refund, and there are no upfront fees to find out if you qualify. Go with the team you can trust at Get My Funds, 800-535-2950 or getmyfunds.com. That's getmyfunds.com. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's Conspiracy Theory Thursday, so let me try this one on you. If you have one of those smart home devices like Google Home or Amazon Alexa, and my granddaughter actually loves that one because she can get it to play music and then she sings along, what is the killer feature that makes it worth the complete sacrifice of your home's privacy? I thought we'd put that to Bob Barr, who's written about it recently at townhall.com. Bob's a former member of Congress, former CIA analyst, and newly elected not long ago as first vice president of the board at the National Rifle Association. Bob, welcome back.
Thank you, Lars. Great to be with you once again, and a very interesting topic that you've hit on for this evening, these so-called smart devices and the kind of dumb people sometimes that use them.
Well, it's one of those things where if you make the game attractive enough, if you say, well, we've got these Ring doorbells and we've got cameras and we've got something that'll order things from Amazon or play music anytime you want, that's a great come on, isn't it?
Oh, it is. The convenience is one thing, but what is particularly bad is the fear that people have now, and excuse me, companies and governments, particularly law enforcement agencies, play on people's fear of crime to encourage them to get these devices, particularly the one that you mentioned, the Ring devices that Amazon manufactures and distributes. Police encourage people to install these, and of course, guess who can access the information? The police. So it's and you know, one thing I was doing a little research on this, Lars, and I discovered something that surprised me. And that is that Atlanta, my hometown, is if either the first or second most surveilled city in America. I would have thought it would have been New York, but it isn't. It's Atlanta. And all of that information, or a lot of that information, I should say, comes from devices that people have installed, these Ring devices and others. You know, and it's a real racket. You probably saw the story just a few days ago. Some guy had this Ring device, and a package was being delivered, and the person who delivered the package, as I think was a man, was walking away. He thought that the Ring device, actually I don't think it was Ring, but it was one of those automated cameras, doorbell things. Yeah. Cameras, insulted him. Called him, used a racial term. So all of a sudden, the homeowner, who I think wasn't even home at the time, much less there, and uttering a racial slur at this guy, has all of his smart devices, which are all linked together in his home, turned off. All of a sudden, they go dead. And it was Amazon that did it, and because they have a policy against using racial slurs, they thought he did that, so they just shut everything down, shut the guy down. I felt sorry for him because he hadn't done anything, but it really got me thinking about how easy it is and how naive people are when they buy all of these linked devices, these smart devices, whether it's thermostats or refrigerators that now show you an inside picture of your refrigerator.
Of your food.
Yeah, I mean, why? But they're there, and people find it convenient, and they're scared to death of everything. So they think that if they just have electronic devices, smart devices, it'll protect them. Well, it doesn't, and there's a downside to it, a really bad downside to it, with the loss of privacy.
Well, let me ask you this. Legally, if you turn over your information to a private company, ordinarily, if the police want access to things like that, they have to have some legal cause. I mean, I know this because years ago, Bob, I called up my cell phone provider, which happens to be Verizon, and I don't do ads for Verizon, but I called them up and I said, hey, can I get a list of all the calls that were made on my account? And they said, well, you have to file the right legal paperwork. I said, it's my information. And they said, no, at this point, it's our information. And I said, hold on, I contracted with you to provide me with cell phone service, and now you're telling me I have to legally file for it? Do the police have to do that if they want access to the cell phone calls you made, for example?
Well, yes and no. If the police want to get information on you or I, they have to, generally speaking, have a suspicion. They have to, and then get a warrant, a search warrant to access that information. Of course, there are exceptions to that, including some included in, our very, our favorite act, the Patriot Act. But what's happening nowadays is all of this information from smart devices that the companies have, they just have agreements with the government so that the government can access it, can buy it from them as a workaround the Fourth Amendment. So the government has these masses of data, Lars. I mean, Lord, no, I don't think you could even quantify how much data they have. The intelligence agencies have it. And once you sign away, when you sign up for these smart devices, you basically lose control over that information. The company has it. They can share it with other companies. Law enforcement can access it. And you basically, in many of these instances, have signed away your right to have that protected against abusive intrusion by the government without a warrant. People don't pay attention to this. They just like the convenience and the feeling of safety that it gives them.
Bob, the part about this that bothers me the most is that when I go to my bank, there are laws that say they have a fiduciary duty not only to protect my money, but to protect my privacy. If I walked into the Atlanta bank where you bank and said, hey, tell me how much Bob Barr has in his account, they'd say, it's none of your business and we're not going to tell you. That's the proper role for a private company, even if they're not legally or constitutionally required to guard my privacy. You'd think they say, we just guard our customers' privacy because it's good business. Now the companies have decided it's good business not to guard people's privacy, but actually to cut deals on the side with the government to give up information without even having to file a subpoena or a warrant. What's the attractive part of that for the company?
The attractive part of it for the company, of course, is that they have data that then they can use to determine what the individual's preferences are. They can use that information to determine where their markets should be. It's sort of like, politics, political campaigns. They want information on individuals to target the political propaganda, and companies love that information. And of course, government loves it also. I think James Bovard, who is a great privacy expert, wrote an article just recently about how our intelligence agencies are sopping up huge quantities of information from social media and other companies who have gathered this information because consumers, that is users of these so-called smart products, have signed releases when they sign up for this stuff.
Well, I can understand why the company wants it to market me other products. Why is it attractive for the company to say to the government, and we'll share it with you?
Well, that's a very, very good question. I think that a lot of this really started in earnest after the 9/11 attacks, and the Bush administration wanted to access data that have been gathered by telephone, by communications carriers. And I think only one company, I forget which one it was, only one company resisted. And they had trouble with the government because of that. Government wants data because it can get it, and it wants to know what's being done, by who, by when, so that they can extrapolate and figure out what people are going to do in the future.
Absolutely. That's Bob Barr, the former member of Congress, now on the board of directors of the NRA. Bob, thanks very much. Back in a moment, we'll talk about Ireland and free speech. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you on Conspiracy Theory Thursday. And we've got a lot to talk about. I mean, there are a lot of things that might fit into the conspiracy theory area. For example, our Twitter poll today. Did Hunter Biden get a sweetheart deal on gun and tax crimes because of his anti-gun and pro-tax daddy, Joe Biden? I would have to say yes to that. You can answer the Twitter poll any way you like, at Lars Larson Show and at LarsLarson.com. Brought to you by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. AMAC has the conservative values I believe in. I joined the group a long time ago, it was years ago, and you should too. Just go to amac.us or call 888-262-2006. AMAC is better for you and better for America. Now, in yesterday's poll, and it came at the right time because today the U.S. Congress actually took some action on impeaching Joe Biden, although all they did was vote in favor of sending it off to a committee. Is there anything wrong with forcing a move to impeach Joe Biden right now? I would answer no to that. So did 87% of you. And only 13% of you thought there was a reason to put off impeachment of Joe Biden. And every time I talk to a Republican member of Congress, I'd be glad to talk to the Democrats too. They don't like to come on the show as much as I do, as I would like them to come on. I ask them, shouldn't Joe Biden be impeached? And if they say, well, what would you impeach him for? I'll tell you what. I've got a long list of things, starting with energy independence, with inflation, with a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, with not taking preemptive action against Russia when it comes to Ukraine. I don't want us to be in the Ukraine war. I don't think there should have been a Ukraine war. And you notice wars like that didn't get started during Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who was disparaged regularly for not knowing anything about foreign policy, while Joe Biden was disparaged by even Bob Gates, the guy who used to work for Obama, who said never underestimate Joe Biden's ability or opportunity to screw things up. But Gates also said that Joe Biden has made every wrong foreign policy move in his entire career, that there isn't one of them where he called it right. Well, consider that. A shout out to our friends in Gretna, Virginia, where they listen to great talk radio all day on WMNA. That's FM 106.3 in Gretna, where you can find my show there Monday through Friday. Glad to have you on board. Now, I want to tell you about something that's going on not in this country, but in many cases, I think it's worth watching what goes on in Western Europe, because oftentimes there are trends that start there that are then reflected in the United States of America. Jonathan Turley, writing at Zero Hedge, says the Irish Green Party followed many on the left around the world, including our own Democrat Party. This week, they came out in favor of censorship and speech controls. Now, when I read that, I thought, my first thought is always, well, we have a First Amendment, and if the First Amendment to the Constitution is actually enforced and applied properly, we shouldn't have to worry too much about free speech. But Turley goes on. Indeed, the party went full Orwellian as its chair, Pauline O'Reilly, called for restricting freedom to protect freedom. Now, I know you've heard this before, because I think it was Ben Franklin that warned if you trade away a little bit of your liberty for security, you're likely to get neither. Turley's piece goes on, the legislation would criminalize incitement to violence or hatred against people with protected characteristics. Now, take that one before I go any further. Incitement to violence, things like inciting a riot, are actually a crime in communities in America. And you say, well, how does that work constitutionally? Here's how it works. You have First Amendment rights to free speech, freedom of the press, freedom of expression. But they can be subject to time, place, and manner restrictions. So if you stand on the edge of a crowd, as Al Sharpton did way back in the day, and you incite the crowd to riot, that can actually be a crime. Now, of course, if anybody brings a charge of incitement to riot against somebody like Sharpton, they're likely to be challenged in court. And then the courts can decide, were your words just free expression, or did they actually encourage people to go out and commit other crimes, arson, murder, assault, things like that? But then Pauline O'Reilly of the Green Party in Ireland went on. Condoning, denying, or grossly trivializing genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes against peace. Well, that's a pretty broad barn door. You could drive a truck through that one. Limiting free speech has become an article of faith for many on the left. And the anti-free speech movement, he writes, has become openly Orwellian in claiming to protect freedom by limiting freedom. It employs terms like disinformation, misinformation, malinformation to obscure their effort to silence those with opposing views. Rather than calling it censorship, they call it content moderation. And Ms. O'Reilly spoke to the Irish Senate this week and declared, when one thinks about it, I don't agree with this, but when one thinks about it, all law and all legislation is about the restriction of freedom. This is exactly what we are doing here. We are restricting freedom, but we're doing it for the common good. Well, I guess that's true, but take one of the most serious crimes, murder. If society restricts murder, are they restricting your freedom? I guess you could make that argument and say, why, you should be free to murder anyone you want. Oh, we'll make a law against that. That restricts your freedom. It's a ridiculous argument. But it's the same message, Turley writes, of New York Democrats who are calling for limiting speech as a way of protecting democracy. Hillary Clinton, or Bill Clinton's former Secretary of Labor, Robert Reich, has declared that free speech is tyranny. Now, can you imagine this? This is coming from the side of the aisle that about 50 years ago, when there were anti-war protests, there were people who said we have to have the freedom to go out and protest against the war. There were even students who went to court to say, I have to have the freedom to wear a black armband to school. And the Supreme Court said, yes, as a matter of fact, you do. O'Reilly, though, assured citizens that giving up freedom was nothing new or threatening. Here's the quote. Throughout our Constitution, one can see that while one has rights, they are restricted for the common good. Everything needs to be balanced. Well, balanced against what? I mean, there's speech I don't like. When people advocate for killing unborn babies, I don't like it. I find it gross. I find it disgusting. But should you be able to silence somebody simply because the government disagrees with them? And Turley finishes up by saying, what is particularly chilling is how low the threshold is for denying speech, according to Pauline O'Reilly in Ireland. It now appears that if somebody feels deep discomfort, that's enough. If a person's views on other people's identities makes their lives unsafe and insecure and causes them such deep discomfort that they cannot live in peace, our job as lawmakers is to restrict those freedoms for the common good. Absolutely outrageous. Watch for it to come here. Hey, if you're buying that name brand CBD right now, write down this website, genericCBD.com. That's genericCBD.com. Make the switch to generic and save today. You could save up to 75%. Their products, fantastic. On a side note, they sell a muscle and joint cream that's out of this world. My wife and I love generic CBD. It retails for $100. It's on sale, though, now for $39.95, and you can try it for free. Just pay the shipping, $2.95. This penetrating cream melts right into your muscles and your joints, your knees, your elbows, and your lower back. You won't believe how fast it goes to work. Plus, it doubles as a great moisturizer. Try it for yourself. You'll love it. And don't worry, it's not a subscription. Get your free sample at genericcbd.com. Get that sample headed your way at genericcbd.com. That's genericcbd.com. These products and statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or illness. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's what we like to call Conspiracy Theory Thursday. So here's a good one. James O'Keefe, the man you've heard on this show so many times, going back more than a decade, talking about the information he digs out that a lot of the mainstream media could do. He began it with, I think it was one guy and a video camera, and they put together investigations that would put to shame 60 Minutes or any of the big documentary or investigative reporters. Well, he's got it again. He's got a bombshell video revealing how the company BlackRock buys U.S. senators and then influences policy. But if you're hearing about that for the first time, you should listen up, because we'll understand why it's going this way. Addison Smith joins me now, an energy reporter for JustTheNews.com. Addison, welcome to the program.
Lars, great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm glad to have you, but why is O'Keefe's bombshell interview getting suppressed at this point?
Yeah, well, I would say they're trying to suppress it, but they're not having too much success, because despite Google's alleged suppression, this video from James O'Keefe from O'Keefe Media has gotten millions and millions of views, been shared millions and millions of times. So I think they've done a great job of kind of defeating the alleged censorship. But I noticed that I noticed the day after the release, I went on Google and I typed in BlackRock, and I pressed the Google News tab, and I didn't see any stories about O'Keefe Media Group's bombshell report of Serge Varley saying essentially that BlackRock, runs the world, that you can buy a senator for $10,000. None of that was on the Google News tab. So I pressed the second page and didn't see it. And then the third page, and I finally saw one mention of it, and I don't think there was another mention until the fourth page. Moreover, on Google, they have a popular tweets tab that links to Twitter, where they show, whatever you're Googling, how popular it is on Twitter right now, what people are saying about it. Well, the so-called popular tweets about BlackRock were from a day before the James O'Keefe bombshell, and two of those tweets had virtually zero likes. They had 3 likes compared to the 120-something thousand likes from the O'Keefe Media Group video. So it was what seemed to be a very obvious case of Google, tamping down the story, trying to suppress its reach. Google denied this when I reached out to them. They did not explain exactly how this wasn't possible, but they did deny it.
And by the way, just so you know what we're talking about, I'm talking to Addison Smith, who's a reporter at JustTheNews.com, an expert energy reporter. But what happened was O'Keefe, who specializes in getting undercover videos, he's got video of a recruiter for BlackRock saying that the Russia-Ukraine war is good for business, making the claim that you heard Addison say, that you can buy a U.S. senator for $10,000. This guy's a recruiter for a multi-trillion-dollar asset management firm. He tells an undercover journalist that hedge funds like BlackRock can, quote, run the world by controlling the wallets of politicians like senators and even the president of the United States. That video has now been seen 10 million times and got over 100,000 likes. But as you point out, Addison, it seems to have been throttled, if nothing else, on some of the search engines like Google. Is there any way that can be by accident and not deliberate?
Well, I suppose there could be a way that it could be by accident, but I don't think it is, and I don't think it's something that a lot of that really anyone would buy, considering that BlackRock is the second largest institutional shareholder in Google. They've got 365 million shares of Google, which is about $44.5 billion stake in the company. And so it wouldn't be surprising for a company to look out for their top institutional shareholder and, toss them a bone by by suppressing this story. Now, what Google told me, and I'm reading directly, quote, "We do not change our ranking systems to target one piece of content, and we haven't done so in this case. Our ranking systems apply consistently to all content available online without regard to political viewpoints." Now, what's interesting about that is this ranking system they're referring to, on their website, it states that it's an algorithm that uses relevance and prominence to provide the most useful results. But that doesn't explain why the results of a tweet with 3 likes and stories from back in February were being provided ahead of this bombshell BlackRock story that's getting millions and millions and millions of views. It seems to be the exact opposite, that the least useful results were being provided ahead of the most useful.
Addison, let me ask you this. You're a reporter. I'm an opinion guy. I try to stay away from, dragging you into opinion. But is this a case where it's going to take the Congress yanking top officials of Google back in front of them and asking them? I don't often think the members of Congress do that good a job of asking questions, sadly. But to haul them up and say, how is this happening if you've got the same algorithm that actually, for Google's own benefit, they want the most popular stuff up there so it can be seen by more people, and it's an indication of what's popular and what's not, because that benefits Google. But in this case, if it works against Google and all of a sudden it gets suppressed, how can that be happening if they're using the same kind of algorithm and if nobody inside the company is trying to manipulate how those tweets are chosen or searches?
Yeah, I think it would be great to get some actual headway on this, in Congress, in the Senate. Of course, probably wouldn't get as far in the Senate as you would in the House. House of Representatives, considering the Democrat majority in the Senate. But I think the American people would love to see Google executives, big tech executives in general, be testifying as to allegations of big tech censorship, to answer for why things like this, what seems to be a clear case of suppressing a story. And you've got to remember, Google controls about 90% of searches, internet searches in the world. They have a monopoly on this. So the fact that Google has this power is definitely of public interest. But then again, you have to consider what BlackRock's recruiter said in that video. They buy people, they buy politicians, they buy a senator for $10,000. They can effectively own that person and control them. So you've got to keep in mind, as much as we would love to see some accountability and transparency here, we don't know who BlackRock has in their pocket on the left or the right that's passing legislation in Washington.
By the way, we won't have time to talk about it tonight, but I want you to go and read not just Addison Smith's story about James O'Keefe's bombshell and why it's being throttled, apparently, but also the story about the FBI trying to convert its cars to soy-based tires. I mean, it just sets itself up for a joke. We're going to do something that's based on what? Ideology, and have the FBI riding around on soy-based tires? Addison Smith, thanks very much, sir.
Lars, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Always glad to have you on. Back in a moment. Glad to get your calls. 866, hey, Lars. You've got the Lars Larson Show. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm glad to get to your phone calls and your emails at 866, hey, Lars. We've got to talk about Adam Schiff, because I think this is absolutely outrageous. Yes, the Congress has finally voted this week to do what it wouldn't do last week, and that was to censure the California Congressman Adam Schiff, and to say, you've done something so wrong that we're going to levy a punishment that the Congress has only put down on members of Congress 8 times in the entire history of this country. So that it's a good thing that they did that. Here's the problem. They didn't go beyond that, and I think they should have. I'll get into what I think of Adam Schiff and what he had to say, but I want to first invite your calls. If you want to join the best conversation in talk journalism, it's right here every day at 866-HEY-LARS. That's 866-439-5277. Send your emails to talk@larslarson.com. If you're a naysayer, we'll put you right to the head of the line at 866-439-5277. And if you'd like to vote in our Twitter poll, you can find the question every day. We put up a brand new question every day out of the news of the day. You'll find it at Lars Larson Show and at larslarson.com. Now, about Adam Schiff, you might remember that about 6 years ago, going all the way back to 2017, Adam Schiff was making claims that he had the smoking gun. He described it as the smoking gun. He claimed to have the evidence to prove that Donald Trump was in league with Russia, that Donald Trump was elected as president in 2016 with the help of Russia in collusion that involved Vladimir Putin and the country of Russia. Now, was that true? Turns out it wasn't. Most of us knew that it wasn't true, but he said it anyway. The FBI helped him in that lie, and I'll remind you of some of the history of that. You see, Hillary Clinton was desperate to win the presidency. I think Hillary Clinton believed that she was owed the presidency. She had planned to become president way back in 2008, only Barack Obama managed to best her in that contest. And she, I think, ground her teeth for the next 8 years and said, I have to win the presidency. America owes me the presidency. Even though at the time, a lot of us, and I was one of them, who said, look, the woman has no background to be president of the United States. She was an elected senator, and that was a setup job. I could do a whole show on the way she set that up to be able to grab that Senate position and cheat her way in. She also served as Secretary of State under Obama, kind of a consolation prize. And what did she do with all that? She decided to make a lot of money. She made a lot of money because as Secretary of State, she had the power to sign off on deals like the deal that sold a huge amount of America's uranium reserves to a Russian company. And then the Russian company invited her husband to give a speech for $500,000 cash. Now, if that sounds pretty sleazy, it is sleazy. So how would she win the presidency? She decided to win it through sleaze and cheating. What she did was she took some research, so-called, that was done by a company called Fusion GPS. And Hillary Clinton paid for that research along with the Democrat National Committee, except they tried to hide the fact that they were paying for it. They sent the money through their Seattle-based law firm, Perkins Coie, through the Washington, D.C. office of that firm, so they could use them as a cutout. It's what you do when you want to pay for something, but you don't want anybody to know who paid for it. You send it through your lawyer, who is supposed to keep your secrets. Well, Perkins Coie did. They hired Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS hired Christopher Steele, the former and I think now disgraced former British agent. He was a spy, and he went to work in the private sector afterwards to make a lot of money by going out and collecting information. Except he couldn't find good information to condemn Donald Trump, so he made it up. And they put it in the Steele dossier. And what happened to the Steele dossier? Well, Adam Schiff kept getting briefings on all of this. We now know that the FBI lied about the Steele dossier. We know that they lied in court documents to a FISA judge. We know that they got wiretaps on American citizens like Carter Page, who is a member of the Trump campaign. We know the whole thing was made up out of whole cloth. And Adam Schiff kept amplifying it by coming out and saying, I've got the smoking gun. I have the proof. It's in my hands. I just can't tell you about it. Well, now that that whole scheme is said to be a lie, proved to be a lie, not just by the FBI and the FBI's own testimony, not just by the Mueller investigation, but by the John Durham investigation as well. It seems very clear at this point the FBI lied, and they knew they were telling lies when they did it. But Adam Schiff did about 400 interviews on television. They total up to about 45 hours of Adam Schiff on TV pushing out lies and unfounded claims. So he said, I've got the proof right here. What does he get? He's now running for the U.S. Senate in California. He's still a member of the House of Representatives. He's been stripped of his committee assignments. And you know what? This joker is actually wearing this like a badge of honor. He goes on TV shows full of liberals like The View and talks about how great he's doing now that he's been censured. He's wearing it as a badge of honor. He claims that he still has the proof. He claims, and he was actually asked straight out on television within the last 2 days, he was asked, well, what do you say about all this? Everything you said is proved to be a lie. And he says he stands by all of it and doesn't regret saying a single thing about it. I want to play that soundbite for you so you see exactly the way that Adam Schiff is behaving, having lied to the American public, having tried to change the outcome of a presidential election and tell lies about Donald Trump. Listen.
Do you have any regrets on how you handle the Russia issue? Obviously, the former president was never criminally implicated for anything involving Russia.
No, not at all. I think the investigation of his misconduct was very important.
What misconduct? You know, the FBI now agrees there was no Russian collusion. The Mueller investigation, headed up by a guy who was friendly to the Democrat Party, headed up by a guy who hired 17 lawyers, many of whom had worked for the Clintons. He wasn't exactly an unbiased guy, but in a good way. Because if you hire a Democrat or you hire somebody who's Democrat friendly and he hires a bunch of Democrat friendly investigators and they spend 2 years and more than 30 million taxpayer dollars to investigate the claim of Russian collusion and they find absolutely no support for it whatsoever, you've put the lie to everything that Adam Schiff had to say. And yet the most they would do to him is censure him. Frankly, I wish the Congress had a mechanism by which they could remove him from office. I guess that will be up to the voters at this point to decide, having lied in this way, I have a feeling there are a lot of Democrats who will appreciate those lies by Adam Schiff so much that they will want him voted into the U.S. Senate. This is the kind of thing we're up against, folks. We're in a country where elections are supposed to be decided, where we pick our representatives by the voters. And they're not being decided by the voters anymore. They're being decided by the mainstream media. They're being decided by lies that are told by federal agencies and thoroughly corrupt organizations like the Department of Justice and the FBI. And we've got members of Congress who don't mind at all lying to the American public if it furthers the agenda of the Democrat Party. You're listening to The Lars Larson Show. Welcome back to The Lars Larson Show. If you listen to this show on a regular basis, you know I absolutely detest the term gun violence. I have a number of guns. I'm not going to say how many, but I have plenty. Pistols, rifles, shotguns, AR-15s, and not one of them has ever been violent. Now, there are violent people out there, and violent people use all kinds of things. They use blunt objects. They use edged objects like knives and machetes, and we hear about them committing crimes. But it's the person who's violent, not the gun. And yet, there's been a drumbeat from the conservative side. The accusation, as John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, points out, that conservatives say, well, all these liberal cities controlled by Democrats, places like Chicago and Detroit and St. Louis, they have some of the strictest gun laws around, and they have a lot of violence done by human beings using guns. But then the other side says, yes, but your Republican states, your red states, they're terrible. Dr. John Lott can sort all that out for us. He is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. I serve on the board of directors of that, but that's my only bias there. John, welcome back.
Great to talk to you again, Lars. Thanks for having me on.
Would you mind outlining how this goes, that you've got both sides saying the statistics are on our side, and the left likes to say, yes, but the red states, those are the most dangerous places in America. Are they right or wrong, or is somebody playing games with numbers?
Right. Well, it kind of started earlier this year when Gavin Newsom went out and he made the claim that the average murder rate was much higher in the states that voted for Trump in 2020 than they were in the states that voted for Biden. And there's truth to that for 2020. If you look at 2021, though, which the data was out and available at the time that he was making that claim, the reverse was true. When you had the increase in murder rates over the last couple of years, you had a much bigger increase in murder rates in the Democrat states than you did in the Republican states. But even if you look at 2020, what you find is that you have different counties in the states. Law enforcement is a local issue. Policing is local. Judges are elected locally. In virtually all the states. District attorneys are elected locally in virtually all the states. And, so whether somebody gets arrested, whether somebody gets charged, whether somebody gets convicted, those are local decisions. The states will make decisions on what the penalty will be for, let's say, shoplifting or for murder or whatever that's there. but it's the local governments that enforce it and actually make the final decision on what a particular criminal gets. And what you find is that the blue counties, the ones that voted for Biden, are much, much more higher murder rates than the counties that voted for Trump. And in the red states, even if you just look at the data for 2020, where the Republican states had a higher murder rate, it was because the Biden counties in the Republican states had much, much higher murder rates than even the Biden counties in the Biden states. So the higher rate of murders in 2020 in the Trump states was driven entirely pretty much by the blue counties that were there.
Could you also argue that if you're in a place that has a high violence rate, violence caused by human beings, that you might be inclined to vote for the candidate, whether it's for president or governor or senator or any other office, that you think is best going to address that? In other words, in a place where there is a high murder rate, you might ordinarily expect people to vote for the candidate who says, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do something about this violent crime, versus the candidate, as many liberal candidates do today, who says, no, we should excuse those criminal acts and we shouldn't send people to prison. I would expect that places with a high murder rate would want somebody who is going to be a law and order candidate, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, you look at the election in New York City recently, where they went for Eric Adams.
Yep.
Part of the reason why he won was because he was a former police captain. Surely he's better than de Blasio was in terms of this. He may not be kind of what you or I would want to have there, but sure. I mean, people, even within Democrat cities, even if you're still going to elect a Democrat, there's been some move. But look, they've recalled the district attorney in San Francisco. There was an attempt to recall the district attorney in Los Angeles, another Soros-backed district attorney there. So, there can be changes there, but you're not seeing these counties completely flip from Democrat to Republican control, even if you're getting relatively more conservative Democrats being elected there. But the bottom line is that even over the short period of time that you're talking about here, the reason why the Republican states in 2020 had a higher murder rate was because you had a much, much higher murder rate for the Biden counties in those states than even the Biden counties in the Democratic states. That you had Biden counties in both states had higher murder rates than Republican counties, but the gap was much larger when you moved to the Republican states.
And by the way, John, I'm compelled to point out that while the recall of Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, who was a terrible DA, worked,
right,
and the one against Gascon did not, I think it was mostly because of structural errors by the people who were gathering the signatures on the Gascon. Right. Because in every modern initiative, petition, or recall that I've seen that actually works, they keep track of who signs. They make sure they don't have duplicates. They make sure that people really are registered voters in the area, which is usually required. And that one did not. And as a result, they had a gigantic rate of error within the petitions. And that, for the most part, as I understand, is what killed the recall of George Gascon. Not that people didn't want to recall him, but that they didn't make the ballot because they didn't take the ordinary precautions most initiative campaigns would have taken.
Yeah, no, I mean, there were mistakes in terms of how it was run. I think they probably would have been successful. Whether they have the money and the time to go through the process again or not, I mean, obviously, even if they didn't spend it very effectively, it still cost them a fair amount of money to go and try to do the recall that was there.
And by the way, if you go back to the original donors and say, by the way, we screwed up on the first one, we made mistakes with how we spent your money, would you like to write us another large check? I would expect that many of their donors might have said, no, if you screwed up with the money I already gave you, I'm not going to correct the error by giving you even more of my money. And people really had to dig deep. Initiative campaigns are not cheap.
No, they're not cheap at all. It costs a lot of money
to go. You have to have a lot of signatures on these. I don't remember the exact percentage, but if you have to have 10% of the voters or something like that in a district, just imagine the amount of effort and time to go and get people to sign a petition on that.
Dr. John Lott from the Crime Prevention Research Center. Doc, it's a pleasure. What if you could help turn back the clock and help your dog play like a puppy again, no matter their age? It's Lars, and it sure works for Sir Winston Churchill, my Bernese Mountain Dog. That's why Dr. Marty developed Nature's Blend, because your dog needs a diet full of real cuts of meat, similar to what they'd eat in the wild. Dogs go bonkers for Nature's Blend. When given the choice between Nature's Blend and the giant online retailer's #1 bestseller in dry dog food, a study shows 29 out of 30 dogs choose Nature's Blend first. Tori from Tulsa says, my fur baby is so eager to eat it. Other dog foods I've tried gave my sweet boy issues with allergies. They all went away with Dr. Marty's and Nature's Blend. Give your dog a food they'll love and help support their youthful energy, healthy skin, easy digestion, and a happy full life. For a limited time, claim 54% off Nature's Blend and get a free pack of premium dog treats from Dr. Marty Pets. Go to drmartypets.com/pets or text PETS to 511-511. That's text PETS to 511-511. Study available on request. Message and data rates apply. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm glad to get your calls at 866-HEY-LARS. That's 866-439-5277. Send your emails to talk@larslarson.com. You're listening to The Lars Larson Show. Welcome back to The Lars Larson Show. One of the reasons I talk so much about public education is, number one, it's a very important subject. Number two, it's because most Americans already pay a gigantic amount of their taxes, both federal and state and property taxes, to support public education. And then we get lousy results out of it. Now, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I thought I'd bring on Rick Hanushek, who is the Paul and Jean Hanna Senior Fellow in Education at the Hoover Institution. Rick, welcome back to the program.
Thanks very much, Lars. Good to be back.
Good to have you on. Now, tell me this, because it is routine for politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, to say why we have to protect our fine public schools. Are our schools fine, doing a fine job for kids right now?
Well, they certainly didn't do well during the pandemic. And there were lots of questions before the pandemic of whether we shouldn't be doing better because we haven't been completely competitive internationally.
Well, but let me ask you, a lot of people are going to use the pandemic, I think, as an excuse going forward. They're going to say, well, the pandemic, as though that explains everything, the way they do with global warming. I mean, everything is the fault of global warming. But you point out, or the Washington Post pointed out, the average math score for kids in public schools today in 2023 is the same as it was in 1990, and the average reading score is the same as it was 19 years ago. We haven't gotten any better, haven't gotten worse, but haven't gotten any better, and that can ignore the pandemic. Is the pandemic the go-to excuse for everyone?
Well, that's certainly been convenient, and I think it's important because when you shut down the schools, you don't get what goes on in the schools, so that even if we think the schools could be better, they're better than nothing, is what we found out. So we have a lot of information on that. But you're absolutely correct that we have to look beyond the pandemic and say, how do we help these kids out? Because they're not doing very well.
No, and in fact, when I looked at, there's a thing called NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and it shows that in a lot of states, the number of kids in grade 4 who are reading proficiently, meaning they're not excellent, they're not superior, they're just reading proficiently, is sometimes less than 1/3 of all the kids in the school. And does it make any sense to have a system that fails 2/3 of the students on a regular basis?
Well, I wouldn't go quite as strong as you did, Lars, in that proficient is a reasonably high standard. If we had everybody proficient, I think we'd be happy today.
Fair point.
I think we can do better. And what we've seen both in some states and across around the world is that kids do better in different circumstances. And so we have a challenge facing us.
So how do we meet that? What's the best way to fix the system? Because the way I see it, an awful lot of parents are making a sensible decision to say, the public schools are failing my kids. I'm pulling them out. I'm going to seek private education. I'm going to seek charter education. I'm going to seek online schools. I'm going to find something else because, as you said a moment ago, it may not be any better, but it's no worse. And it would I think it would be hard to do as badly as the public schools are right now.
Well, I think that offering more choice and having a little bit of competition in the schools certainly is a valuable thing. And we've seen it. There was a recent study out of the Hoover Institution at Credo that suggested that charter schools are now systematically outperforming the comparative traditional schools. But that's only a part of the story because there's still 80% of our kids who are in the traditional schools and are probably going to stay there for a while no matter what we do. And so we have to think about how can we do something about the traditional public schools at the same time that we offer more competition and choice.
Well, Rick, you'd point out right away that, Lars, you're not an educator, but let me throw an idea at you. The biggest difference I can see between the charter schools and the public schools is that if you get a charter, it literally is a contract, and you say, we will educate the kids and we will meet certain benchmarks. What happens if you don't? You lose your charter and you're out of business. And maybe your kids go to some other place, some other charter. Failure in that case actually is a good thing because it means everybody working in it knows if I don't succeed, then I lose my charter. The public schools, on the other hand, and this is why I think it's the biggest difference, the public schools say, if we fail your kids, you know what we do? We get to keep all the jobs we have. We get to keep all the people in the same position, and we ask you for a big pile of money. And nobody loses when you fail the kids in public schools, but if you're in a charter school and you fail to meet the benchmarks, you lose your charter. What if we simply applied that idea to the public schools?
Well, that's an extraordinarily important idea. And in fact, there are a few large school systems that have done that. Washington, D.C. is one where if you are a teacher and don't perform well for 2 years in a row, you can actually get fired. And other school systems in Dallas and now in Houston are moving toward paying much more attention to how effective the traditional public school teachers are. It's putting that incentive into the whole operation of schools that's extraordinarily important, and you've hit the nail on the head.
Does that kind of amaze you, though, that kind of reform, which is I agree, a bold reform, is coming out of a very liberal community like Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think that people in different liberal communities also find that education is the solution to the future, and they're concerned about their education. But it was a huge political fight to get this change, and I just gave you the names of free school districts that have done dramatic things along the lines that you would suggest, Lars. But there are 13,500 school districts in the U.S., and most of them aren't doing that.
No, they're not doing it. But then in Washington, D.C., perhaps the parents have said to the school board and the city of D.C., either make this work for our kids or we'll get rid of you. I have to believe that was driven by public pressure. Am I wrong?
It was a little bit of public pressure, and it was an inspired leader, Michelle Rhee, a number of years ago, got the political backing of the mayor, and they pushed this through. And so what we've seen is, at least with inspired leaders, we can make the change, and then the public does like it. They're not going to change. They don't want it to change.
Rick, are there any other things that you could suggest that seem to have worked somewhere that could be applied elsewhere?
Well, the thing that we know is that quality teachers are the secret. We learned that during the pandemic in places where we didn't have quality teachers and other places where we did. And what your idea of choice and competition is doing is trying to put incentives on schools to hire and keep the really effective teachers. And that's what we have to do more broadly. We have to recognize that not all teachers are the same, and there are some that we really desperately want to keep, and there are some that we aren't as sure that we want to keep at all.
I'll tell you what I'd take the Jack Welch approach, the guy who ran GE for so long. Say, walk in, ask the principal, who are your 10%, the least effective teachers in the building? You know who they are, and then say, you're all getting pink slips, and we're going to replace you with somebody else. That's Rick Hanushek from the Hoover Institution. He is the Paul and Jean Hanna Senior Fellow in Education. Back in just a moment. I'll get to your calls. 866-439-5277. You're listening to The Lars Larson Show. Welcome back to Lars Larson Show. I'm in favor of school choice, and to a large degree, I don't have a dog in the fight. I mean, I went to public schools, so did my wife. My adult kids went to public schools. It's not that I'm necessarily just in favor of alternatives. It's that I believe the only way to make something truly excellent is to have competition. And for the most part right now, in most American communities, if you move to a neighborhood and you say, well, what are my choices for where I can send my children to K through 12 public school or to school? And you'll be told by most people, well, if you live at that address, your kids go to that school. That's all the choice you get right now. And if you were to say, but isn't there an alternative place that I can send my children? And the answer you're going to get is no, you don't have an alternative place to send your kids. There should be, and it will do some good, not just for the private schools, the charter schools, the online schools, the virtual learning opportunities. It'll do some good for the public schools as well, because when the public schools know that they can fail your kids to a large degree and that there is no consequence, that when they fail your kids, and according to the NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, as many as 2/3 of the kids at grade 4 cannot learn proficiently. Now, I understand when parents say, well, when a kid gets to be a teenager, how do I keep them from skipping school? Well, I guess you raise them the right way so that they wouldn't dare skip school because they'll be in trouble with mom and dad. But at age 4 or 4th grade, you've got a 9-year-old kid. Mom and dad tell that 9-year-old, this is where you're going to school. You won't cut class. You will do your homework. Now, parents have a role in all that. But the public schools right now fail kids miserably. And what we're seeing right now is that charter schools, which operate as a public school, they're open to all. If there are too many kids who want to go to a given charter, they hold a lottery. And then in many cases, the charter school gets bigger and bigger. Same thing applies to the online learning schools. And yet, what happens is the public schools that are driven largely by the desires of the teachers' unions, they make the argument that if parents had any kind of choice to send their kids other than to the government-run failing public school, that this would hurt the public schools, as though competition hurts. Well, competition can hurt if you're doing a lousy job with the education of kids, and then some competition comes into the marketplace, and a bunch of your parents pull their kids out of your failing school and put them into a successful charter school, yeah, you're going to lose the money, the federal money and the state money that would otherwise go to that public school. Isn't that the way it should work? Shouldn't the public schools have to say to themselves, we need to do a really good job. If we don't do a very good job, then we're going to lose the funding that goes with these kids. Well, consider this, though. Our friend Vince Bielski, who's at Real Clear Investigations, he's suggesting that with all the school choice that is now being delivered up in many communities, places like Arizona, where they've decided that they're going to offer parents the choice of taking their kids out of public school and taking a good chunk of the money that goes with them, anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 in state funding every year to take your kids elsewhere. And that's also been imposed by 8 other states, Arizona, Florida, Indiana, West Virginia. They've all said, you want to have school choice? You want to take your kids somewhere other than the failing government schools? You're allowed to do it, and some of the money that the taxpayers have allocated to education, K through 12 education, will travel with your child to that school. Now, that makes sense. Now, the teachers' unions are screaming bloody murder because they say, well, if you do that, you might put the public schools out of business. I don't think it's actually that bad. But frankly, if they're failing your kids, they deserve to go out of business. If charter schools can decide, and I've got no dog in the fight for charter schools, I don't do commercials or ads for them. I just happen to believe in the concept that if you make a contract, and that's what a charter school is, the charter is a contract. And the charter school says, we will perform for the kids in the following way. The way you'd have a contract to put a new roof on your house or buy a car or take a job. Any of those contracts are legally enforceable. Do you know what the contract is with most government-run K through 12 public schools is? We'll take your money. We'll give your kid some education. If we fail your kid, we get paid anyway. Now, does anybody out there want to say they would sign up for a deal like that? But what Vince Bielski at Real Clear Investigations is arguing is that they may come on too fast. That if we have so much that has to be offered in choice, in school choice, that what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up having it expand so quickly that some of the failures are going to show up. He says the universal laws amount to a bracing change in school choice. Such programs have existed for decades, but until now, they've been limited to a narrow set of students, like kids from low-income families or in poorly performing public schools in need of special ed. By making all students eligible, regardless of their ability to pay for a private education, universal programs in those 8 states expand the possible pool of participants by about 4 million students. Now, that's a big change. That is a 40% increase in eligibility in just the last 2 years. That brings a total of 13.6 million students after the programs start in just a couple of years. And school choice advocates are saying this is going to be great. The problem is when you have school choice and the parents do decide we're going to pull our kids out of a conventional government school and we're going to put them into an alternative, a private school, a charter school, an online school, or any of the other alternatives. They can be very, very creative. The problem is that if you expand very quickly, you have the possibility that you will have some failure. And when you have that failure, I don't want people to lose heart. In fact, one of the most common questions I get from parents who send me emails and they say, I understood there was a charter school in our area and it failed. Doesn't that show that charter schools are a failure? And I answer back, no, failure is quite common in life. Let me point this out. The statistic from the business world is that 8 out of every 10 small business startups fail within the first 3 years. 8 out of 10. Now, you say, well, that shows that private business fails. You say, no, what it shows is that when you start a business, sometimes you're going to get it right, and sometimes you're not. When you start a public school that's funded by the taxpayers, you never fail. You always get the money. You always have the school. Nobody ever loses their job or their contract, even if you fail every single one of your customers. Do you know, there was a school, and this was in Texas, and we learned about this story about 2 weeks ago, where they canceled graduation. And why? Because the school only had 5 kids that were eligible for graduation. And I think at the end of the day, some of the teachers' unions are going to lose, but the kids ultimately will win. You're listening to The Lars Larson Show.